Ready to make fashion fireworks? Right now at Old Navy, get up to 60% off the entire store during Old Navy's Red, White, and New sale. Save big with items for $2, $4, $6, and $8, including women's tanks for just $2. Plus, 2 days only, tomorrow and Sunday, get flag tees for the whole family for just $2.50. All summer essentials up to 60% off, like flip-flops, tank tops, swimwear, and shorts at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Select styles only. Entire store offer valid 6/28 to 7/5. Excludes clearance, gift cards, register lane items, jewelry, today only deals, 2 day only deals.
Blog Talk Radio.
Everyone, and welcome to King Jordan Radio. It is Thursday, June 29th, 2017. It is Season 5, Episode 30. Tonight on the show, we're going to be talking about the late Michael Jackson, who passed away Sunday 8 years ago. We'll talk about the Menendez brothers, who recently were on Lifetime, and a lot of people didn't know the whole ins and outs, and our guest will discuss that. Also, Bill Cosby, the Mistrial, we'll get into that, correctly predicted by our guest, and O.J. Simpson. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a listen to this, and then we'll introduce our guest.
As one of this nation's most important and powerful legal figures, Thomas A. Mesereau Jr. has achieved remarkable success in high-stakes criminal defense trials. Widely known for achieving acquittal of the late Michael Jackson on all 14 charges in a child molestation indictment, Thomas accomplished far more. A renowned criminal defense attorney, the famous and the not-so-famous have put their trust in him. Born in West Point, New York, Tom is a graduate of Harvard University, the London School of Economics, and the University of California Hastings College of Law. He began his legal career as a prosecutor, but soon found that criminal defense work would be where he would find his calling and, more importantly, his passion. Tom has successfully represented a wide array of white-collar and blue-collar clients in federal and state courts and has won 3 consecutive white-collar cases before federal juries in Los Angeles. He was the first and only California criminal lawyer to obtain bail for his client, Robert Blake, who was facing murder charges. In 2009, he successfully defended the highest-grossing real estate agent in the country, who was facing 21 counts of conspiracy and bank, loan, and mortgage fraud. Tom was also the first criminal lawyer to call an expert witness on cross-racial eyewitness identification in a death penalty trial in Alabama. His client was acquitted. Tom has been recognized with numerous accolades, tributes, and awards. Barbara Walters named him as one of the year's 10 most fascinating people for his trial excellence and commitment to representing the underprivileged in 2005. Loyola Law School in Los Angeles presented Tom with the prestigious 2011 Fiddler Institute Award for Excellence in Criminal Defense. He has been asked to speak at Harvard Law School and was asked by the City Club of Cleveland to be their Law Day speaker in May 2015. While Tom's legal career is noted with many highly publicized courtroom successes, he has a private and lifelong commitment to pro bono work, charitable activities, and remarkable giving. His compassion for others compels Tom to provide pro bono work as often as possible. For the past 18 years, Tom has defended a capital murder case with a colleague in Alabama. The jury acquittal of Wesley Quick, who spent 6 years on Alabama's death row for 2 murders he did not commit, is listed in the report of the National Registry of Exonerations, a joint project of Michigan and Northwestern law schools. Tom believes in returning to communities to help solve problems and reach out to the youth. He co-founded the Mesereau Free Legal Clinic, where judges and lawyers donate their time 2 Saturdays a month and work with individuals who need help with legal matters.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, Tom Mesereau. Good evening, Tom. How are you?
How you doing, Jordan?
Okay, so it's been 8 years this past Sunday that your client and your friend Michael Jackson has passed away. Now, let's go back 8 years ago, and the news people were reporting it, and then I want to get your take after this clip.
We're getting some breaking news coming into the situation right now from about Michael Jackson, the king of pop, who's 50 years old. Let's go to Deborah Farrick. She's working the story for us. What are we picking up, Deb?
Well, here's what we can tell you. This is what's being reported by KTLA. Apparently, Michael Jackson suffered cardiac arrest this afternoon. He was rushed to UCLA Medical Center.
At 12:21 this afternoon, the Los Angeles 911 operators took a call in regards to a need for a medical emergency at the 100 block of Candlewood Drive, which is in West Los Angeles. When the paramedics got on scene, they treated the patient and then immediately transported the patient to UCLA.
We just talked to Brian Oxman. He is the family attorney for the Jackson, and he says that according to Randy Jackson, Michael Jackson's brother, Michael Jackson collapsed in his home in West Los Angeles this morning, and they called paramedics. He says that the family is either at UCLA Medical Center or en route to UCLA Medical Center.
CNN sources are now saying, multiple sources, that Michael Jackson is in a coma at UCLA Medical Center, suffered from cardiac arrest, and is now in a coma.
If you look at the aerials that you're showing on air and you see the number of people that have already gathered outside the hospital, if that isn't testament to the star power of Michael Jackson, I don't know what is.
And we're just getting this in right now, and it's very, very sad news, Jim Moret, and to all of our viewers. Both the Los Angeles Times and CBS News are both now reporting that Michael Jackson has died. Now, CNN has not confirmed that, but the LA Times and CBS News are reporting that Michael Jackson, 50 years old, the king of pop, has died. A very, very sad moment.
What was Michael Jackson doing in Los Angeles before he was taken to the hospital? What new information do you have for us?
Well, we do know that he's been in Los Angeles preparing to undertake this major concert event that he was scheduled to perform in London this
I have
coming
to stop you for a second, AJ. CNN can now confirm from the LA coroner that Michael Jackson is dead.
Okay, Tom, when you hear this, what comes to mind, first of all?
Well, first of all, I just can't believe it's been 8 years. It seems like yesterday that the shock of Michael Jackson's death, took over all of us. And I remember that day very well. I was in a big federal criminal trial in Los Angeles in federal court. I was ending the day, walking out of the federal building, and Tanya Zilke, who was a girlfriend of Randy Jackson. Randy's been a friend of mine for years. She came up and said she had heard that Michael Jackson had passed away, and I didn't believe it. Because remember, there were so many rumors, false rumors, exaggerated rumors about, things Michael Jackson supposedly did that turned out not to be true. And my first thought was hoping this was just another one of them. And then I'm walking out of the building, and two armed bailiffs came up to me and said, "Did you hear what happened to Michael Jackson?" And then I realized, oh my God, this might be true. So I called my office, and my voicemail was full. And it was full with journalists and media people from all over the world trying to get in touch with me to get my comment. And then I just was in shock. I just said, "Oh my God, this has got to be true." And I found out it was true. And I was in shock. I was numb. I was sad. And I just remember thinking, when I could poke through the shock, I remember thinking some of the things that Michael had said to me during the trial, because that really was the intense time I spent with him. I think I was meant to defend him in that trial and to be involved in that chapter, and I think that was my main role in his life. After the criminal trial, we worked with him for about 9 months when he was living in the Middle East, but I wasn't as close to him as then. And I remember he looked at me at one point and said, "Tom, life can be very hard," and he had a sad look in his eye, and he was correct.
Was that
life
during
can
the
be
trial?
very hard during the trial, yeah. And I remember thinking, the poor soul, he really was fundamentally kind, gentle, sensitive, decent. He just felt just like everybody always had their hand out trying to get something from him and resenting him if he didn't give it to them, or sometimes he could, sometimes he couldn't. But I just felt very, very sad for one of the greatest geniuses in life, who also happened to be one of the kindest people in life, who died way too soon, and I think was tormented and troubled much more than he ever deserved to be. Because, fame can be difficult for anybody. But to be the most famous person in the world, you can imagine what you're facing in terms of trying to trust people. And there's a side of him that just wanted to have his feet on the ground and be nice and kind and have fun like children do. And I think he was chasing that illusion his whole life, feeling he had been denied a real childhood, wanting to be just kind of an ordinary guy at times and just have ordinary fun with people. And, yes, he experienced things that we'll never experience, most of us, because, we don't have the talent and we don't have the world presence he had. But the poor fellow also paid a price for it. And I remember just being very, very sad. Once I got through the denial and the numbness, I felt very sad for a very, very kind, nice, special person who died way too soon.
Yeah, a lot of people, I hear actors say it was almost like they lost a family member. Michael Jackson was like the soundtrack of their life.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, when you listen to his music and watch his dance routines and look at his incredible choreography, and, we all enjoyed that. But unfortunately, the poor fellow paid a little bit of a price for it, to say the least. He just, he was forced to rehearse till 3 a.m. as a little boy, get up a few hours later, go to school. He was forced to work in clubs, in Chicago and Detroit, child and weekends. Just wasn't, just able to enjoy spontaneous, innocent fun the way most kids were. And yes, his genius and his talent were perfected in the process. But the poor fellow, I think, just paid a terrible price. I think his emotional health and his physical health did. And, we all enjoyed his music and his artistry, but the poor soul was a human being, and a very sensitive one at that, who paid a price and should not have been dead at 50. But I mean,
and
look. Doctors gave him things they shouldn't have given him. They gave Elvis Presley things they shouldn't have given him, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, how many stars can we point out who physicians, gave drugs to for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe to do business, maybe to stay close to the star, maybe they thought it was good advertising. I don't know, but it's certainly wrong. And he should never have been taking this propofol to sleep.
I totally agree. Now, you got into this trial via Mark Garagos' act. He was fired, right, in
yes.
2003, I guess, or 2004?
2004. I think it was around April of 2004. Garagos was let go from the team, and I replaced he and Ben Braffen.
So in 2004, about springtime, when were you officially
around
lead
April,
counsel?
I think it was. I forget the exact date, but I took over as lead counsel approximately March, April of 2004, and the trial began January 31st of 2005.
Now, what was your mindset that you were going to do different than the attorney that was fired, Mark Garagos, going into this trial, that you saw that you were going to do different approaching this trial?
Well, I saw a lot of things, as an observer that just didn't ring right to me. Race seemed to be an issue before I got in the case. I understand why Michael and his family thought it was an issue, but I didn't think making race an issue was going to help them in that case, in that community. I noticed that when Garagos went to court, the Nation of Islam was around Michael, and regardless of what you think of the Nation of Islam, I didn't think they belonged in that community in a case like that, because it was primarily a white, to a lesser extent, Latino community, very few African Americans, and Michael was someone who brought all races together. He didn't divide them. Listen to the music you just played to start this show. Look at his family. Look at his kids. Look at his statements through the year. Look how he was loved on every continent, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, you name it, Europe. I felt that with the kind of jury pool you were going to get, making race an issue was a mistake. So one of the first things I did was ask his father and Jermaine to stop calling it illegal lynching on television. I said, it probably is, but, I want to win the case, And I wanted to get the Nation of Islam out and not make black activism as visible a thing. And, I was listened to. I was trusted. The Nation of Islam trusted me. His father did stop making the statements. Jermaine did stop making these statements. I said, look, this is Michael's community. He chose to live in Santa Maria, California, in northern Santa Barbara County, a predominantly blue-collar, mostly white community. And this is where my jury's going to come from, and I'm here to win. That's my job. After we acquit him, he can hang out with anybody he wants or say whatever he wants, but I got to get this job done or he may die in prison. So that was the first thing. I didn't like the lawyers seemed to me to be promoting themselves constantly, big smiles on their face.
In front of the cameras.
Yeah, I found out that this is a blue-collar community, a working-class community. I found out they were arriving in private planes. I felt that was not going to help Michael at all. And I wanted to tone down a lot of the media stuff, a lot of theatrical stuff, and just kind of get down to business and, be kind of low-key and hopefully focus on who was important, 13 people, the 12 jurors and the judge. They were more important than the lawyers getting attention. If Garagos had put him on 60 Minutes, which I thought was a terrible mistake. I didn't think Garagos had the right persona for that community, and Randy was the one who was after him. Pardon me?
What do you think 60 Minutes was a problem in your opinion?
Michael looked like he didn't want to be on the show, and he told me later on he didn't want to be on the show. He said his lawyer insisted on it, and he
really?
looked, he looked uncomfortable. He looked, just out of place. It was I was wondering as I watched it, is the lawyer promoting himself, or is this good for Michael Jackson? And of course, Michael was always suspicious that people were trying to profit off of him, as they often were. And Michael was always suspicious that people might want attention because they were around him. And, the only thing to focus on in this case was acquittal. And it was obvious It wasn't going to be easy. You know, they had all these so-called victims, you know, or people saying that they saw him committing lewd acts and things of this sort. So it wasn't going to be
Who also
easy.
sold their stories, right?
Yeah, you know, a very conservative community with a very high conviction rate in that courthouse. Ugly charges that, you know, I consider worse than being charged with murder. It's being charged with, you know, child molestation. So I had to change the tone. I had to change the atmosphere. I had to make sure we focused on what was important. And, you know, God was with us. We won.
Have you ever tried any kind of sexual wrongdoing accused of in any other case?
Yes,
in other words, have you ever?
In my
number
of them in my career. I've done a lot of sexual assault cases, huh?
So prior to that, you have been with someone who was charged with sexual misconduct.
Yes, I had many trials, and I won a lot of them too. I remember at the beginning of the when I got into the Michael Jackson case, I remember your favorite reporter, Diane Dimond, you know, went on TV and said words to the effect that I had not defended sexual assault cases. And it was obvious she wanted me off the case, you know. She had covered me in the Robert Blake case and had been very complimentary of me. And when I first appeared in Santa Maria, you know, Superior Court to represent Michael Jackson, I had no knowledge of her history with, you know, Michael. And I knew nothing about the antagonism and her closeness to Tom Sneddon. And I actually went up to say hello because she had covered the Robert Blake case for Court TV and had been very complimentary of me. And I remember when I said hello, I saw something in the corner of her eye that seemed uncomfortable. And I remember thinking to myself, what's wrong with her? What have I done? And then I realized very quickly what the history was. And
is it true
it was
that
obvious
she
didn't want to compliment me.
I heard she got special treatment. She was able to get into Neverland and do other things that other reporters weren't able to do, like get in Neverland early.
I was told she was the only member of the media that was part of the raid on Neverland in November of 2003 when 70-plus Santa Barbara sheriffs raided Neverland. I was told she was the only member of the media that was allowed to accompany them. So she clearly had a tight relationship with the late Tom Sneddon, the district attorney of Santa Barbara County. And she would make comments on TV. She thought she was clever. She wasn't. You know, my opinion was she was hoping the family would get rid of me. I'm sure she would have her own opinion on this. She may disagree with me.
She was later fired, right?
What's that?
She was later fired from TV, right?
I was told she was let go from Court TV. I think it was in the fall of 2005. That's what I was told. I don't know if it's true. I got a call from one of the New York newspapers. I think it was the Daily News called me up and told me she was leaving Court TV and did I have a comment, and I refused to comment.
Oh, okay. Now, witness like Macaulay Culkin, how important was he to your case, if at all?
Enormously important. Remember, you know, they brought in evidence not only that you know, the Arvizo boy was molested. They also brought in evidence that 5 other young men were molested. One of them, Macaulay Culkin. So to call Macaulay Culkin as a witness in the beginning of our defense, and to have him say, you know, he's my friend, I was never touched improperly, was extremely important. And Macaulay Culkin was under tremendous pressure not to help Michael Jackson, not to testify. I'll tell you something else that's funny. You talk about Diamond. The night before Macaulay Culkin testified, I met with he and his attorney. And his attorney seemed very nervous about the whole thing. Macaulay wasn't nervous at all. He had absolutely no, you know, doubt that he wanted to come in and tell the truth and support his friend Michael. Well, the next morning, you know, I routinely got up at 3 o'clock every day during the trial. I went to bed at 7:30, latest 8. I get up at 3 o'clock, and I would do about 3 hours of work, three and a half hours of work before I went to court. And I was getting dressed that morning, and I turned on the television set. It might have been the Today Show. It could have been Good Morning America, but I think it was the Today Show. And they had Diane Diamond saying her sources tell her that Macaulay Culkin is not going to testify. He's not going to be in the courtroom. And I had just been with him the night before where he told me nothing was going to stop him from being in the courtroom. So, whoever her sources were, they didn't give her the right information.
Wow. So, okay, you have that. Now, the jury is out for how long? About a week or so?
Jury was out for, they deliberated, I think they came back the 8th day. They went out on a Friday, and a week from the following Monday, they had their verdict.
So how many hours is that approximately?
I don't know what the total hours were. As I recall, I don't know what time they went out the first Friday. They went through the entire next week, and then the following Monday, as I recall, it was around noon, we were told they have verdicts on all counts. Right.
And they did ask the judge to read back some things, right? They wanted to see I believe the accuser Gavin on the television again. I think that's one of the things.
I had in my closing argument, I had asked them to look at that tape carefully. The prosecution played the Gavin Arvizo interview with the police in their rebuttal case, and the rebuttal case was a case they put on that followed our defense case. The prosecution goes first in a criminal case, and the defense can rest when they rest, or the defense can put on the defense's own case, which I did. I call lots of witnesses. If the defense puts on their own case, then the prosecution gets to rebut their witnesses. So they put on a short rebuttal, but it included playing the Gavin Arvizo interview with the police. And the press were suggesting that this was terrible for the defense, that it was going to hurt us, it may be a game changer, and I didn't think it would be at all. And in my closing argument, I told the jury, please look at that carefully and look for the following. And I mentioned a number of things that they should look for when they see that interview to determine if it's credible. And I was later on told by the foreman of the jury that they looked at it carefully and they agreed with everything I said.
Really? So you encouraged the jury, take a look at this,
I did.
judge for yourself.
I did.
So
I said, look at it very carefully and ask yourself these questions. And I had a number of things they should look for. And I was told later on that it helped the defense.
So by the time that you're like in day 4, day 5, are you communicating with Michael? Is he nervous? What's the feeling between the both of you at this time?
Well, I'm getting calls, each day, what do I think? But there was no doubt in my mind that sitting at Neverland and watching TV, he was going to be nervous. I mean, the media wanted to see him convicted. Some of the stations, including Fox TV, were showing photos and film of the jail cell. They said they all but suggested he was going to be in. Here's a jury
where he would be.
Here's a jury deliberating, and while they're deliberating, the media, major networks are showing a jail cell where he could end up. To me, that was very unfair and poor reporting, and certainly wasn't journalism. And thank God the jury didn't even listen to any of it.
This jury wasn't a jury like where they were free to do whatever they wanted in terms of television, right?
No, they were not.
To a point.
They were absolutely not. Absolutely not.
They
were instructed throughout the trial not to watch any media or any news reports on the trial, not to read them in magazines or newspapers. They were instructed repeatedly.
But they weren't in a hotel or anything like that, right?
They were not sequestered.
OJ.
They were not sequestered like the O.J. Simpson jury, but they were instructed to not look at any media reports on the trial.
What decision goes into that? The judge's decision? Is that prosecution and defense goes into that? Who makes that final decision?
I think, certainly each side can request the judge do that, but I think in high-profile criminal cases, a judge will regardless. He will always tell jurors each day, before they leave the courtroom, stay away from media reporting, stay away from television, newspapers. If you see a report coming on the case, don't watch it, don't read it. I mean, they were instructed every day during that 5-month trial to stay away from media.
So, okay, let's bring it to that day, June 13th, 05. So tell me how that day started for you, and then finally you ended up victorious on all counts.
Well, I woke
Bring
up
us
that
back
morning
to that
with I woke up that morning with a very strong intuitive feeling this is going to be a special day. Something's going to happen. And I had a very strong feeling there was going to be a verdict. And, you know, I've taken a lot of verdicts before and a lot of verdicts since. And you're always nervous whenever you think there's going to be a verdict because you just don't know who those jurors are and what they've been discussing and what the chemistry in the jury room has been. You don't know who's dominated, who hasn't. You know, you just don't know. You just don't know who's affected who. You don't know who wants to go home and end this thing. You just don't know. So there's always uncertainty, and that makes you nervous. But I have to say that I woke up that day. I had a very strong feeling it's going to be a special day, and I was very optimistic about Michael. I just had a feeling they weren't going to get 12 people to convict him. Did I know they would get 12 to acquit? No, I didn't. But I just felt the way we had handled our case, the way we had cross-examined their witnesses, the quality of the witnesses we put on, the way we attacked them in the rebuttal case, and I felt our closing argument was very, very good in terms of directing the jury what to focus on, what to think about. I felt that they had not proven their case, and I felt that we had pretty much proven him to be an innocent man, which we didn't have to do, but I told them in my opening statement, you know, this is not going to be a typical criminal case. I'm going to prove to you this man's innocent. And I felt we had done that. And I just, you know, without really being sure, I had a feeling this is going to be a special day and it's going to be a good day.
So when you got to the courtroom, how long did you have to wait till the actual verdicts were read? Approximately.
You know, it took a while. We were at lunch and near the courthouse, and I remember a bailiff came in and said they have verdicts. You better let Michael know. And
did
we
you
did
look
that.
at the jury as you came in?
This is before. This is before. I'm at lunch, so we're told their verdicts. He'd like to read it. I think it was at 1:30. I had to call Michael and tell them to head over to the courthouse. And as I recall, I think the motorcade with traffic got to the courthouse around 1:45, I think, California time. And, of course, you know, people all over the world were watching to see what the verdicts were. Times Square, everything stood still in New York. And, you know,
all over.
It just was I remember later on looking at some of the footage. It's on my website, the footage of the verdict. And Brian Williams on NBC says, you know, words to the effect to let you know how big this is. There are 2,200 accredited media, you know, about to watch this verdict. He said that's more than O.J. Simpson and Scott Peterson combined.
Oh my!
And it was an amazing day. Amazing day. You know, I was at the courthouse, and then, you know, the motorcade was slowly winding its way to the courthouse, and we went in. The courtroom was packed, mostly with media people, but his family as well. And then the jurors came in, and they had very serious looks on their faces. They handed the envelope. The foreman handed the envelope to the judge's clerk, who gave it to the judge to look over the verdict forms. He then gave the forms back to the clerk, and the clerk then read the verdict on each count. 14 not guilty.
A lot of people said it was 10 not guilty, like in the beginning, because I guess, I don't know why. I guess the original indictment was for 10?
The original indictment was 10 felony counts, conspiracy, and the rest of the counts were either child molestation, attempted child molestation, or giving alcohol to a child to prepare the child to be molested. So the grand jury indicted Michael on 10 felony counts. As the case was about to go to the jury, Judge Melville, on his own initiative, on his own motion, as we say it in the profession, said he wanted to give the jurors an option on the last 4 felony counts. And the option was this: if they find Michael Jackson not guilty of any of the last 4 felony counts, which are alcohol-related counts, meaning if they find him not guilty of giving alcohol to a victim, a child, for the purpose of molestation, they then have the option of convicting of a misdemeanor giving alcohol to an underage person. So
it was almost like a bone he threw to the prosecutors, it sounds like.
Absolutely. He was giving them an opportunity to walk out with a conviction, even if it was a misdemeanor conviction. They didn't ask for that instruction. He did it on his own initiative. We didn't ask for it either. So because they acquitted him on all the felony counts, they then had to decide whether he was guilty or not guilty on the 4 lesser included misdemeanor counts. And they said not guilty 14 total times, 10 felonies, 4 misdemeanors.
And it was reported that, you already said that you did not do a press conference like most lawyers in that situation with this high-profile case. You were elected to go back to Neverland with Michael Jackson. Is that true?
I did. I felt that our place was at Neverland with Michael and his family. I was exhausted. I'd had it with the media, to be honest with you. And it took me a while to get over that because I was so upset with the media, the way they tried to spin a conviction. Imagine every day the jury's deliberating, if I turn the TV on, I'm looking at jail cells where he's supposed to end up. I had a mindset from the day I showed up to appear for the first time that the media is not going to manipulate me, and they're not going to manipulate the jury, and justice is going to be done. And I didn't even like smiling as I walked in and out of the courtroom. I felt that even if I smiled, they would try to blow it up and try to make the local population think I was having fun in a serious trial. I was very, very anti-media during that whole case, and I think I was right. I think it required a lawyer to do that to win.
Your hours were very short in terms of you were in bed by 8, 9 the latest, Bert?
I lived like a hermit for 6. I lived up there in Santa Maria, which is in Santa Barbara County, north of Los Angeles County, and this is the northern part of that county. I lived there for 6 months in a condo, and routinely I was in bed at 7:30 or 8 o'clock every night, and I was up without fail at 3 every day. I had staff in condos around me. We had a war room with about 40 computers and 4,000 binders of documents, and we had staff that would work all night to update my witness books. When I try a case, I'd like a notebook or notebooks on every witness. I'd like every document in chronological order that refers to that witness. I don't care whether the document's a newspaper article, a police report, a statement, a declaration. I don't care what it is. And the prosecution kept giving us documents late, and my staff would try to update my witness books because we would know who was going to testify the next day if I were cross-examining. So they had a key to my condo, and they would be dropping updated witness books on my stairwell. It was a duplex all through the night. So I would get up at 3 o'clock, put my bathrobe on, make a pot of coffee, get something to eat, and then look down my stairwell and see notebooks, on all these stairs. And I would go down and pick them up and start preparing for the day. And I just did not want to be seen in a restaurant or a bar or a hotel lobby or any place where the media could try to, put me in a compromising position. And I lived like a monk. I lived like a hermit.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Okay, we'll get to the callers who want to talk to about that. Let's touch on the Bill Cosby trial. We have a juror who talks about it. Here's some sound and we'll talk.
Those exclusive new details about Bill Cosby's sex assault mistrial. A juror speaking only to ABC, taking us inside those 52 hours of deliberation. This is a stunning account, and revealing why the 12 jurors were ultimately unable to come to an agreement. ABC's Lindsay Davis has the story.
From crying outbursts to intense arguments to a possible hand injury after one juror punched a wall, the 52 hours of deliberations inside a tiny room not large enough to even pace took a toll on the jurors in Bill Cosby's sexual assault trial, according to a juror in an exclusive interview with ABC News who describes the experience as grueling and emotional. The juror, who agreed to speak to us on the condition of anonymity, said 2 jurors prevented a guilty verdict. 10 of the 12 jurors agreed Cosby was guilty of 2 of the 3 counts against him, having a sexual encounter with accuser Andrea Constand without her consent, and giving Constand drugs without her knowledge to prevent her from resisting. But the juror also told us they were near acquittal on 1 count, that Constand was unconscious during the event. The vote, 11-1. When they first entered the room and took a non-binding preliminary poll, the jurors overwhelmingly said they thought Cosby was not guilty on all 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault. The juror says the holdouts against finding the 79-year-old entertainer guilty were not moving no matter what. Constand says Cosby drugged and sexually assaulted her at his home in 2004. He says the encounter was consensual. Although only 1 other accuser was allowed to testify at trial, more than 50 other women have come forward with similar accusations. Cosby has also denied those allegations. ABC News reached out to several other jurors who declined to comment. But the juror we spoke to tells us despite the fiery exchanges and intense pressure, the group of 7 men and 5 women are now friendly and keeping in touch by phone and text. Lindsay Davis, ABC News, New York.
This is really fascinating. Let's bring in ABC's chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. Dan, always great to have you on this. But this notion that the jurors would enter that room, a non-binding vote, all of them saying not guilty, and then over the course of 6 days, 10 out of the 12 would decide guilty on 2 counts.
Yeah, look, it's very typical for jurors to take a straw vote when they come in and say, you know, where does everyone stand? And everyone sort of raises their hands. That's part of the deliberation process, right? That's not a binding verdict. That's not a ruling. That doesn't happen until the verdict form goes in. But what's astonishing here is that you had all of them saying not guilty, and then as the deliberation process went on, 10-2, I mean, this is out of a movie. Right, this is like 12 Angry Men the other way. It's I've never heard of something like this where 10 of the 12 jurors apparently changed their minds to the point from where they were ready to acquit, prepared to convict by the end.
Lindsay was reporting there. It was a tiny room, not even room to pace, this juror apparently said, but fists into walls. I mean, this could come up again.
Well, I think that you can expect the defense to file a motion and say, look, they were ready to acquit. If the room hadn't been so terrible and the situation hadn't been so bad, Bill Cosby would have been acquitted, and therefore there should be no retrial. They're not going to win on that motion. They'll likely make it, but that's not the sort of motion you win on. To win on something like that, you have to really show juror misconduct. And even when you show juror misconduct, typically what you get is a new trial. And Bill Cosby's getting a new trial anyway. So really interesting, though, this reporting on this.
A peek inside that juror room. All right, Dan Abrams, always great to have you here. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, Tom, you've been covering this from the get-go. What is your take of the hung jury, if you will?
Well, I'm not surprised. I always thought it was a weak case. I wasn't in the courtroom. I don't know the evidence like people who participated know it. But it was always my understanding that the accuser had not been credible with the police when she initially talked to them, that she apparently said she hadn't had contact with them after the alleged event. Covered, I think, that there were something like 72 phone calls between them, and that she and her mother had gone to a concert either with him or he got them tickets. And, that was very suspicious to me. And, there's no forensic evidence tying Cosby to anything. And my understanding is that deposition that they read, that the prosecution thought would be good for them, Cosby says everything was consensual. He says everything was consensual, I think. So that sounds like a tough case to me. That's a he said, she said type case. And I don't know why it would get stronger the next time around, but then you never know who's going to be on the jury and who's going to control the jury room, dominate it, who's going to want to go home. You just don't know. And by the way, there's a show that's going to be on Oxygen next month, July, where they're going to focus on the Michael Jackson jury. I was interviewed for the show. I'm on that show. Well, I was interviewed for it. Exactly who they'll put in it and how they'll do it, I don't know. But my understanding is they got 6 jurors to participate in the show. So I'm going to certainly be looking at that one.
it's interesting with these jurors, and we had the two jurors in the Michael Jackson case change their mind after they got involved with Stacey Brown allegedly. So we see that a lot.
Well, but that's all meaningless because, you know, when you're on a jury, you're told not to watch media, not to read anything about the case, not to discuss the case with anyone outside the jury room. And then, you know, as you said, I think it was a couple of months later after they were saturated with media and who knows who they knew that talked to them and were upset with it. And all of a sudden they say they've changed their mind. That's meaningless to me.
Yeah. Once they put in their final vote, there should be some kind of law, I guess, that prevents them from saying, you know what, now I think he's guilty. I mean, it's kind of like it's wrong, you know, morally, and it should be wrong lawfully.
Well, I think both of the jurors you're talking about initially were interviewed right after the verdict, and were defending their verdict. And then for 2 months later to say maybe I made a mistake. You know, to come out 2 months later and say I made a mistake, I don't put much importance in that. I really don't.
Now, you were interviewed along with John Burris and Wendy Murphy, and you predicted that it's going to be a weak case and Bill Cosby will walk this next trial.
Well, I think it's a very weak case, but you never know who's going to be on the jury and what perspective or bias they'll bring in. You just don't know, and that's why jury trials are risky. They're very hard to predict. But I don't think it's a strong case, and I think we learned that, you know, when the jury hung.
Now, I look at your case where they tried to bring in at least 5 accusers to show the same pattern. Now, this judge could have brought in, I guess, all 50-plus accusers because that's what there was. They found, I guess, 5. You know, what goes into that situation? Is it Pennsylvania? Is it versus California? Is it the judge? How does that work?
It's very discretionary with the judge. In the Jackson case, the prosecution wanted to bring in more evidence than he let them bring in, but he let them bring in evidence that 5 other young men had been molested. And he allowed them to bring in witnesses to say they saw that, even if the prosecution didn't bring the actual so-called victim in. So, you know, they brought in evidence and witnesses to say that Macaulay Culkin and Wade Robson and Brett Barnes were molested. And then I started our case by bringing in those 3 who said they weren't molested. Now, in the Cosby case, the prosecution wanted to bring in 13 other witnesses claiming that, you know, they wanted to show that Bill Cosby had a pattern of doing this to women. And the judge let them only bring 1 in. So they got a bigger break than we got in the Michael Jackson case, that's for sure. And remember, their trial was 6 days. Ours was 5 months.
That's a huge difference. And now, are you familiar with Bill Cosby's lawyer? And if so, what did you think of his job?
Well, I don't know them, but I think they did an excellent job. I mean, the result shows they did. You know, they have very good reputations. There's a fellow in Pennsylvania who's got a very good reputation, former prosecutor. I understand his closing argument was excellent. And there's a female lawyer from Los Angeles who I think is handling all of his civil cases. And for what I can see, she's doing an excellent job. So the legal team is to be commended. They did a great job for their client.
What about the wife basically going off on the prosecutor, the judge, and everything? A lot of legal analysts said maybe she should have not did that, knowing that there's another trial coming up and you might be dealing with the same judge. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I mean, it's understandable why she's upset and emotional. And I think the judge is enough of a professional to not take that into account when there's a retrial. And I think everyone understands how upset Mrs. Cosby must be over this terrible thing. Remember, he's facing a bunch of civil cases. His reputation's been hurt. He may have to sit in a criminal courtroom again. So I think everybody understands why she's upset. I don't think
and he was
judge.
Supposedly joking with the fans when they, I guess he did some kind of Fat Albert skit, and he said, hey. I guess he was in a good mood, He never seemed down. Was that good? Is that good for your client to do something like that? Like, hey.
Jordan, I wasn't there. I don't know all the details, so I can't pass judgment on him. I'm not in his shoes, and I wasn't there, and I don't know exactly what happened. But, my understanding is he tried to keep his spirits up. I think he showed respect for everybody in the courtroom, which he should have. So I'm not about to criticize anybody when I really don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. So how long do these retrials take, approximately?
Well, I think this will take the same amount. I don't know what the prosecution can do differently. I suspect it'll be another 6-day trial.
The case. Like, how long, in terms of years, will...
my guess is it'll be tried within a year. There may be some delays for whatever reason, but I know the judge was talking about setting a trial date within 120 days, but something tells me it'll be delayed a little longer than that.
Okay, recently Lifetime made the Menendez brothers. Let's hear a clip about the Menendez brothers, and I want to get your take about them 30 years later.
Well, first,
I think that all children love their parents. Trauma to the torso. Parents are like gods to kids. Immense carnage.
And he loved me.
Shocking, the amount of blood.
And I loved him.
This was a horrific crime.
It sounded like
Was it a robbery? Was it a gang-related type thing? Was it a mafia-related type thing?
who hated them?
Stop saying it wasn't right.
I definitely would give more.
TV Land. Hi.
I felt we were in grave danger.
Glass, things breaking, ringing noises from the booms, the smoke from the guns, just chaos.
I just fired every shot I had. I just fired until there was nothing left.
Joining me now on the phone from Mule Creek State Prison in California is Lyle Menendez. Mr. Menendez, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Chris.
Take us back to that night and what happened.
I asked him if that's a threat. He said, you take it for what it is. I know my father. I know what that means. He isn't going to go through a child molestation trial. He would rather go through a murder trial.
That was a damning set of recollections.
I did not threaten him in any way.
She's lying too?
He did not say that.
How do you explain it?
That's not accurate either.
Did you think that you guys were going to get away with this? Murder in Beverly Hills, the aftermath.
Okay, Tom, this is almost 30 years now, and they just did a movie on it. The Menendez brothers, you followed it to a point, I guess, right? What's your take on that story?
I followed the case. I followed the case very thoroughly, and the case was on my mind at a critical point in the Michael Jackson trial. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. When the prosecution rested their case, I felt we had destroyed their witnesses on cross-examination. I felt that I had had more good days taking care of their witnesses than I probably would have in the rest of my life. And that made it very difficult to decide whether to put on a defense case. And I felt that we definitely had a hung jury. If I had rested when the prosecution rested and not called any defense witnesses, I felt there was a very good chance we had a hung jury. I wasn't confident that we had acquittals on every count. And I thought of the Menendez case. The Menendez brothers went through 2 trials. In the first trial, the jury,
right?
Good lawyers, both of them had separate lawyers. Leslie Abramson was terrific, and and the other brother had great lawyers, and the jury hung. And before the retrial, the judge changed most of his rulings that helped the defense. He gutted the defense case, and they couldn't call certain experts, they couldn't call certain eyewitnesses. He really, really gutted their case, and they were convicted in the retrial. I was extremely concerned that if this jury hung, that the trial judge might change some of his rulings that helped the defense. For example, he let the prosecution play the Bashir documentary, and in return, he let us play the outtakes. I was concerned that in a retrial, he may not let us play the outtakes, or the prosecution might not play the Bashir documentary, which I felt helped us more than hurt us, even though the media was all saying it's going to really kill us. So I had the Menendez case on my mind. I said, I don't think Michael can withstand a retrial emotionally and physically, and what if the judge changes some of the rulings that have really helped us? And I said to myself, we got to take our chances and go for all-out acquittal. So I put on a complete defense case, which allowed the prosecution to put on a rebuttal case, as I said before, and fortunately we prevailed on every single count. But what the trial judge in Menendez did was right on my mind, believe me, when I had to decide what to do. And everyone was so sure that no defense lawyer could do well in this case that I said to myself, 99% of defense lawyers will probably rest now, and if they get a hung jury, everyone around the world will say they're great lawyers because nobody gave them a chance. But what's it really going to mean? It's going to mean Michael has to do a retrial, and it may be very different. So I just said, we're here, we've done a good job, let's tell our complete story.
Some of the
and
media
go for
said that what happened to Bill Cosby would be like a victory, they were saying, prior to the verdict.
Well, they would have said that. They would have said that to me if I had hung the jury. But what would it have really meant? It would have meant Michael has to go through this again. It would have meant the prosecution might change their strategy. It would have meant the judge could change his rulings to help the prosecution. And I thought he was in their pocket. I thought he tried to be very fair, and a lot of what he did was very fair. But nevertheless, he might have changed his rulings to help him. And I said, we can't risk this. I'm going to go all out, try and get an acquittal. So,
the Menendez
I guess I'm giving
brothers.
a roundabout answer to your question. I mean, the Menendez case was a tragic case for two wealthy kids who grew up in Beverly Hills and had top educations and great futures, decided to murder their parents and brutally shot the two of them to death one night. Called the police, screaming and yelling, trying to throw the attention off themselves, and eventually were caught and convicted. It's a very bizarre and very terrible case. But trust me, I knew that case backwards and
the credibility of if you believed that they were molested by the father. I wasn't following it at the time. Did you get a feeling either way?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, they both testified in the first trial. Only one of them testified in the second trial. And the testimony was compelling. But what happened in the retrial was the judge wouldn't allow all the witnesses to the sexual abuse to testify.
And those witnesses collaborated what they said, right?
Yes. Yeah, he cut a lot of them out. He cut their experts out. He made it very difficult for them to raise that defense in the retrial.
Wow. And that was probably the first sensational case before O.J., right?
That was before O.J. Simpson. Yeah, that was before. At least the first trial was before O.J. Simpson. I think the retrial may have happened.
And that was on TV.
While Simpson was going on. Yeah. The first one was on TV. The defense lawyers did a great job. I think the prosecutors didn't know how to cope with their defense very well. And the jury did not, the jurors all wanted to convict, as I understand it. But they couldn't agree on what to convict them on. Some said first degree, some said second degree murder, some said manslaughter, and they just couldn't reach any agreement on what the verdict should be.
Wow. The person who played the part said that they deserve to be acquitted. I guess they have knowledge of the case, but we'll see if that ever happens. Okay, our final story is, does O.J. Simpson deserve to be paroled? Here is a quick clip, and then I'll get your take on O.J. Simpson.
Here's the reason why I think he should spend the rest of his life in prison. Because he's an idiot, that's why. Idiocy to this level, when I firmly believe that you are a double murderer. I firmly believe that you killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. I firmly believe that you laughed in the face of the system, you mocked it, and instead of having the decency to walk away because the trial was turned into something else, due to the greatness of Johnny Cochran and the ineptitude of Marsha Clark and Christopher Darden. The bottom line is you had an opportunity, an ideal opportunity to chill out, walk away, and go on with your life. And instead, what did you do? You laughed and mocked Ronald Goldman's family when they sued you civilly and won about $33.5 million, but your money was protected and they couldn't reclaim all of this stuff. And I want to make sure I emphasize this. Under no circumstances am I saying, and I know a whole bunch of people is going to disagree with me, and I get it, I understand it. Under no circumstances am I saying that I believe that O.J. did not get railroaded with this whole memorabilia stuff. I get all. I totally understand it. But when you are an individual that was on trial for double murder, that I believe got off, by the way, and you still don't have the decency and the common sense not to stare the system in the face and give it the proverbial middle finger, you deserve what you get. And as far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what it is. And I hear in the prison that they watch, in the prison that he's in outside of Reno, Nevada, that they actually watch ESPN. I hope he's watching me right now. That man brought all of this on himself. He didn't know any better. He was an idiot for finding himself in another predicament, and he put it on himself, and he deserves what he's getting.
Courtesy of ESPN, that is Stephen A. Smith. Carl, what's your take with O.J. getting?
I don't disagree with what he's saying. You know, I think the evidence was overwhelming that O.J. was guilty, and I think he benefited from fantastic lawyering, including lawyering by the best trial lawyer I ever saw in my lifetime, Johnny Cochran. And to behave the way he did was completely ridiculous, foolish, and he kept, taunting the system, and he got burned. Now, I think anyone else in his position would probably be let out on parole. But because he's O.J. Simpson, they may not do it. Apparently, he's been a model prisoner. He's been a good example to other prisoners. He's followed all the rules, been no trouble to anyone. And as I understand it, he probably should be released. But I wonder if, since he's O.J. Simpson, if they'll really do it.
That'll be next week, and we will find out. Just a few questions from Twitter.
Sure.
From Sane MJ fan asks a couple questions. Aphrodite gave an interview that stated that she was told by a member of Michael's defense team, she didn't say who, that Martin Bashir set up that infamous scene in the documentary that with Gavin and Michael holding hands. What could you say about that?
I was not told that by anyone I trusted. I'm not saying it's not true. It may very well be true, given what I saw Mr. Bashir doing to Michael and the way I think he manipulated him and the way I think we proved he manipulated him. I wouldn't be surprised if that were true, but I really don't know if it's true or not.
Okay, same person, Mr. Mesereau. There are many people, both the general public and some fans, exclamation point, who have a lot of misconceptions about Michael Jackson letting kids sleep in his bedroom. Some people think that he forced boys to lay in bed with him and cuddle while kicking out little girls and parents. This is one of the main reasons that people wrongly think he was a pedophile. Can you please explain to the listeners that MJ let many people, both boys, girls, and their parents, sleep in his bedroom suite?
Well, we proved at trial that he let girls and mothers sleep in his bed. Mothers slept there, sisters slept there. And I never heard of him forcing anyone to sleep in his bed. In fact, the accusers, I don't recall ever saying he forced them into his bed. I don't recall anybody ever saying that, to be honest with you. So this idea that he would force any child into his bed, that's the first time I've ever heard of it. I don't even think the prosecution was trying to say that. They were trying to say that he molested children who were in his bed, but I don't think they ever said he forced anyone in. So this is a new one for me. But we did prove that sisters and mothers slept in his bed, traveled with him, etc.
And his bed was like, for an average person, it was like a house, for lack of a better term, right?
It was like an office building. I mean, it was so big. Even Macaulay Culkin in an interview was laughing about how big his bedroom is. It was like a house.
Right. And didn't the prosecution ask him when he fell asleep that something might have happened in a weak attempt to try to get something?
They were so desperate at that. They really saw this case slipping away. So I think it may have been Prosecutor Ron Zonin, who is a very good prosecutor. I think he asked one of these witnesses, how do you know you weren't molested when you were asleep? Something like that. It's utterly ridiculous.
At MJFam21 says, was the Michael Jackson case your biggest and most proud?
Well, it was my biggest case in many ways. It was certainly the biggest in terms of, the celebrity
media
factor, the media factor. But, everyone's case is the biggest case for them. And
Sure.
I don't value anyone's life more than anyone else's life. So whether you're poor, rich, famous, unknown, whether it's a 1-week trial or a 5-month trial, when you're in a criminal case, it's the most important case in the world for you. So, I don't judge any life greater than any other life, but, there are many reasons to think it was the biggest for sure. Media, celebrity factor. Michael Jackson was the best-known person in the world. He had followers all over the world. He had detractors too, obviously, particularly in the United States. But, that's my answer pretty much. But every life, when they're in trouble in the criminal justice system, the most important case, the biggest case for them is their case. Okay, David on Twitter wants to know, recently in the Lifetime movie, they showed Tito in a reenactment of actual life in 2007 or so, driving into Michael's rented house, demanding money, and the bodyguard drawing a gun. Can you verify if there was trouble with the brothers? I have no idea. I'm not a witness to any of this. I don't know about any of this. I haven't spoken to Tito or anyone about any of this, so I really am not the one to ask. I have no idea. Right, because I remember Randy and, at least when you were involved, Randy helped organize getting you to be the lead attorney, I believe, right? Yes, Randy was the one that, from day one, pushed to have me be the lead lawyer. And from day one, he didn't care. He didn't care for Mr. Garagos. He called me a number of times saying, we can't win with this attorney, and you're the one I've always wanted. And, he was the one that wanted me in, and he worked hard to keep me in, too, because you can imagine the lawyers who were trying to replace me throughout the case, even during the trial. Oh, my, it must have been crazy. I could just imagine. And finally, you recently had some big acquittals for some unfortunate people. Would you share that with my audience? Well, I just tried a high-profile homicide case in Bessemer, Alabama, which is about 30 minutes outside of Birmingham. Very high-profile neighborhood too, right? Very, very tragic case. A war hero from Iraq, a former tank commander, loving father of 2 sons, managed the local insurance company office and came out of his house one morning and just to exercise and was shot to death. And they charged 4 young African-American gang members with the murder. And the first one that went on trial was my client. And my client, I put him on the stand. He admitted doing breaking and entering cars, but he said he had nothing to do with the murder and didn't know it was going to come down and had no involvement in it. And he was acquitted of murder. And I just learned that the Ku Klux Klan have been circulating flyers all throughout these neighborhoods, talking about Rise Up Whitey and talking about the Negro being acquitted. And, you know, it's hard to believe this stuff's still going on, but it is. So that was, I recently tried that case with my dear friend from Birmingham, Charlie Salvaggio, great trial lawyer who I've been trying cases with for almost 20 years.
And you mentioned you had some pictures on your website. Can you tell the audience your website address?
Well, Mesereau at mesereaulaw.com is my email. You know, Mesereau Law is the .com is the website.
Absolutely, and these cases must make you feel good. These pro bono cases that you win so much. I mean, that's got to be a special place in your heart.
Well, I'm glad
when you win those cases.
to see a person with no resources get justice too. You know, a lot of poor people can't afford decent representation, don't get decent representation. And it was nice to see this young man get justice. Nobody thought we had a chance to win in that case.
An amazing job and an amazing job here tonight, Tom. I want to thank you so much. Have a happy 4th of July, and good luck the rest of the way, and hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's always an honor and a privilege to be on your show, and you do so much for the Michael Jackson community, and you're to be commended as well. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tom. Always the best. Have a great holiday on the 4th. Thanks so much.
You too. Thank you.
That was lead attorney for the Michael Jackson trial, Thomas Mesereau Jr. Of course, check him out on Twitter at, well, he has a fan page. Check it out there. Also, good show. So thanks for people like Sane Fan from Twitter who retweeted it. At fan page Mesereau. Go, please go follow that. So I want to give a shout out to Maddie, Pager, Vicky. Thank you all. And tonight we're going to play some Jackson 5, courtesy Madison Square Garden, 2001. We'll speak to you next time here on King Jordan Radio. Thanks so much to Tom Mesereau.